What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Cole, and you're listening to the Real Journey podcast. Our guest today has art installations all over the world from Germany, Japan, Hong Kong, South America, including multiple installations locally and throughout the country. He's gone through 3 recessions, 2 earthquakes, and 2 floods with principles that have guided him, including passion, total commitment, diligence, relentlessness, self promoter, willingness to take risks, willingness to fail, willingness to be rejected, and being a little bit naive. He's been quoted saying, "Every day is a work day and every night is a weekend." Today, I'm hoping to find out how he balances life, business, and happiness while thriving in his passion. Let me introduce you to our guest, Gordon Huether. Gordon, welcome to the Real Journey podcast.
Oh, Matt, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, I heard that at the age of 3, you had this burning desire to figure out what you wanted to do in life. And right now, you're succeeding in art installations around the world. When did you come to realize that art was your passion, and how did you get into it?
I'm not sure I was 3. I think I was maybe 4, but I was honestly, I was sitting on the toilet and I've always been kind of a ruminator thinker, and I had this, I don't know why, but I got this picture in my head that life was like when you're born, you step onto a train, and your life is as long as that train's moving, and at some point the train stops and you get off, and that's the end of it. So I got myself into a little bit of a panic because I wasn't sure how long the ride was going to be, and I don't know where you get stuff like that at 4 years old, but I felt like it was really important that I figured out who I was, what I was going to do when I grew up. And probably in a subsequent bathroom session or walking or whatever it was, I excuse me, realized that I had the heart and soul of an artist. And the most important thing I believe for human beings is to find that, get connected with your inner voice, as it's called, have that dialogue with yourself, figure out who you are, and pursue that with all your might. That's the only way.
And when did you start having, like, realizing that it's within, and digging deep into that?
I don't know that I ever realized it. I just always did it. So it, it just, yeah, I was just always that guy that was always thinking about those kinds of things. And later it was a little bit rough because at some point, even though I realized that I had this heart and soul of an artist, I got this idea in my head that I wasn't very talented. Um, and it might be because my father was something of a Renaissance man who believed that the world has been in cultural decline since the Renaissance, and which meant that you would know how to paint figuratively, really beautifully, and all of that. And my talents aren't over there; they're somewhere else. So it took me a while to understand that actually I did have talent, but before that, I just thought, well, what I lack in talent, I'm going to make up for by working hard and showing up every day, including weekends, the middle of the night, and maybe over time I can earn the talent. And that's kind of basically what happened, and that's all without the benefit of a formal education. I didn't really finish high school and didn't go to art school or business school or any of that. It's just all been intuitive and that determination that you were mentioning earlier.
And so when you first got into art, it was stained glass, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of painting in high school, in an art class, and I think I still have one of them or two of them, and they're probably the most horrible paintings that you ever saw. And then when I was about 16, 17, I was a resident of the juvenile hall in San Francisco, and my father had remarried this Mexican woman that had 6 of her own kids, and I just felt like I needed to get out of the city. Um, Kids that I went to school with were winding up dead in trunks of cars and in San Quentin and all that, so I just knew I had to get out of that environment. So I moved my dad and my stepmother with a well, without very much enthusiasm, I'll have to say, said yes, I could come live with them. And so in the evenings, I'd be pacing the floors, And I'm like, Dad, what do people do here at night? And he's like, well, they go to bed. And I'm like, totally panicked. And so then my dad panicked. And this was in the late 70s. And this was a time where stained glass and macrame and sand candles and terrariums, all that artsy craftsy stuff was all the rage. And my father put basically a box of colored glass on the kitchen table and a little pattern of a parrot. And with 10 thumbs on the kitchen table, I made my first world's ugliest, most horrible stained glass window. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so then I made another window, kind of Victorian, which was also the rage at the time. And I finished that and I put it in the windowsill in my dad's living room. And I just couldn't believe that I made that. And I just totally fell in love with color and light and the idea of crafting something by hand. And it was then that I made my commitment that someday I would do large scale public art installations around the world that would have a lasting positive impact on humanity. So that has been my driving, my mantra for the past, let's see, if I'm 60 now, so that's like 40 years ago is when I made that commitment.
And so right there, that's a big goal, and that's a lot bigger than just you. That's not a selfish goal. That's a goal for, like you said, humanity. And do you think that's a big piece in your driving factor?
Yeah, I mean, it might sound a little self-serving or contrived, maybe even, but I believe that the work that I do ultimately inspires the spirit of humanity. And there's lots of ways of doing that for different people. You're doing it with your podcasting now, and it could be somebody that's washing cars, but they wash those cars cleaner than everybody else, and they take pride in their workmanship and make your car runs better when it's clean. Everybody knows that. So there's lots of ways of serving humanity, and at the same time advancing your own life, your own lifestyle, and that sort of thing.
I love it. And so, how did you start making money with this? Did you jump right in and start selling this, or how did you transition your art into being able to afford, to buy groceries and living off of it? How did you transition?
Well, yeah, right. So I mean, first I got a job at a stained glass studio that was they're still around. I think Great Pains up in Calistoga, and I strapped that Victorian window to the back of my truck, and I drove over there and showed him what I had made, and would he hire me. So pretty much out of the gate, I was making a living doing stained glass. I wasn't doing my own stuff at the time. I was working, for another studio, did churches and casinos and this and that, but it was all about gathering my skill set, learning by observing the world around me, observing what I was doing for this other studio. And then I went to Germany for a couple of years and worked for a commercial glass company there. And then came back to Napa, and I got a job selling windows and doors and whatever at Javco Window and Glass. And one day I quit, and I had a work table in my garage over on E Street and a few sheets of glass and a homemade sandblasting booth, and I just basically started hustling. I mean, I did people's bathroom windows. I did a front door to a trailer one time. I mean, I just would, anything that would move, I would jump on it. And I was still not very talented at the time, and very um, focused just on stained glass. And then at some point, I realized that if I limited myself to one medium, then I would limit the opportunities both as a businessman, as an artist. So, and then I kind of discovered this world called public art, and that's a huge part of our business model now.
I love it. And I'm going to back up. So, when you quit your job, did you have anything lined up, or like what was it? Were you did you not like the work, or was it just did you had a burning desire, like you weren't meant to do that and you needed to do something else? What was that transition?
Yeah, I felt like, from my experiences working first in the stained glass studio in Calistoga, and then working for the commercial glass company in Germany, and then working at Javco Window and Glass, I felt like I had done all I could do to reverse. I mean, I just nothing else for me to do except to take that jump. And so I took the jump, and I had a garage that I could work in, and I think I had maybe $500, $1,000, and I didn't quit that job with a big commission already set up. It just, that's the stuff when I talk about taking risks. You know, sometimes you just have to jump and just go and do. And in your opening comments, you talked about that already. But you know, the one has to be willing to take risks. One has to be willing to be rejected. One has to be willing to fail in order to be successful. I mean, it's what I think. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's certainly been true for me.
What's your definition of success? Do you have that? Have you defined that?
Huh. Well, eating and drinking well, living in a home, whether it's a condo or an apartment or a house. We just finished building this new house. That you have a safe um, place to live, that you are inspired by being in every day. Success is doing what you love every day and making a living doing it. Success is being surrounded by colleagues, uh, whether they're on the payroll or they're consultants or they're colleagues in the industry or whatever it is, that you have a network of friends and associates that you respect. You know, what else would be successful? I mean, you know, the typical stuff, you know, I like to have a nice car, I like to live in a nice house, and I like to eat well. And but mostly it's a basically quality of life. And it's like I said, doing what you love every day.
I, I I would agree with that. Most people consider success. They go, oh, it's financial. They just immediately go to financial. As I'm getting older, I'm learning that it's not financial. It's well-being. It's life balance. It's doing what you love. Basically, exactly what you said. And
But if I
so,
could make a small, hold on, let me make a small correction on that
please,
though.
please.
So I have an artist friend, super super talented. He's a professor of glass, and he's highly educated and an educator now. And and he's so dedicated to his art that he forgets about the money part. And so I've trained him now that every day he goes of his list of things to do. The top of the list actually has to be make money. Because if I don't have money, I don't have a studio. If I'm a painter and I don't have money, I can't buy my paint and my canvas. So we can be idealistic as we want all the day long, but if you can't pay for it, you can't do it. So money is important. So somehow I've been able to balance this interest in money with my interest in living a life that has integrity and beauty in it. And they're not mutually exclusive.
I would agree with you 100%. And so, on that, when you started in your garage and you were focused on the art, the other side business, what was that like? Going out, getting new clients, cold calling, knocking on doors. What did that piece of the art look like, or the business look like?
Yeah, you know, you got to be a hustler. I'm a shameless self promoter. You know, I sold weed in high school, so I guess I understood commerce, and I delivered newspapers. And you know, I when I was still living at home with my mother in San Francisco, I had my own TV in there, and I had my own phone, and I had a stereo, and all of it was from working and making money. So, you know, back to my previous comment, is like, if there's no money, there's, you know, if there's not commerce, an exchange of currency, there's nothing happening. So I guess it comes naturally to me to be a salesman, a hustler. um, those don't sound very like flattering terms, but I'm telling you, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing if you don't know how to turn on the charm and be Monty Hall and let's make a deal. So it's super important. And I think I maybe just have that naturally. I don't know where that kind of stuff comes from. Um, as I shared with you before, I didn't study communications in college. I didn't study business development or whatever. And it's just a natural thing that I got going.
Yeah, I think sales is vitally important because I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and I have to sell her on why she needs to do certain things, and I got to turn the charm on for her. And everyone needs a little bit of sales to get ahead in everything, and it's a good thing. And I think people are starting to realize that, or hopefully they are.
Well, yeah, one of my little favorite little quips is, I'm all about making art, love, and money. So art is my passion and what I do, and love is feeds that passion, I suppose, and the love of humanity and love of life, and money. And if I got those three things going on, I got it going on.
And right now, how many employees do you have currently? So let's fast forward. How many employees do you have now?
Right now, I don't know, maybe 10, and then plus, I don't know, 3, 4 other contract kinds of folks that, digital design, engineering, counting, whatever. So, the network is not more than 15.
And starting out when you were in your garage, you probably wouldn't be able to be where you're at today. And I don't know if I've shared this with you, but my wife was friends with your daughter, and when we first started dating, she had brought you up. She goes, "Oh yeah, my friend and her dad. I go over there and I love the smell of his house because it smells like cigars and leather." And then she said something that was funny. She goes, well, it was funny to me at the time. And then I was maybe 18 at the time. Me and Mari have been together since high school. But she goes, yeah, I went on a road trip with them one day. And instead of listening to the radio, he had us pass around a book in the car and everybody read a little portion of the book. And she thought it was Think and Grow Rich. And I just want to ask you, are you into personal development and learning and growing in that aspect?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that was Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and there's another one that might come to mind in a moment. And I've always hated that title because it sounds so capitalistic, but I'm a capitalist. Um, but so I had read that book numerous times, and I don't remember that story that you just shared or that happening, but it sounds like me. Um, and what I've learned over the years when I've cracked open books about personal development and building wealth for yourself and all that stuff. And I could even go back to Roman times and reading about the Stoics. And what I've found is most of that stuff, I guess I already knew. It just knew it intuitively. So it was more of an affirmation of how I was already thought and was already doing. So I'm not sure what to say with that, but of course I'm into that. Yeah.
And then on the other side of that is business development, because as you grew, I'm sure you had to learn skills with computers, CNC machines, and other equipment. Did you just learn that on the fly? Would you study? Like how did you evolve in that sort of sense? Because you have some large scale designs, and it takes a lot of equipment, a lot of.
Yeah, totally. So that's all true. There's kilns, also known as ovens. There's water jet cutting machines. There's plasma cutters. There's laser cutters. There's so much technology out there. Um, what I have learned is it's better if I don't learn it myself. So I've always felt that I needed to have a group of people around me that were smarter than me in different areas. So I don't know how to use the computer very well, honestly. I don't know how to turn on the CNC machine. I don't know how to fire up the welder. I don't know most of that stuff myself, but again, I've surrounded myself with a team of people that do. And so what I generally do is, well, I'll say it like this to answer that question, and it kind of covers almost everything how I think, is thoughts are things. So the things that you think about are the things that will manifest. So if I see that, wow, gee whiz, look at that machine can do, then I kind of figure out if that's something that works into our business or whatever. And I don't go and research and find the right one. I basically just have to pay for everything. But I'm all about leveraging other people's intelligence and talents.
That's one of the things I'm trying to learn right now is leveraging other people and growing with and through other people. So that's something that I'm personally going through. What's the favorite piece of art that you've done? What's your favorite piece that you just feeds your soul?
Oh wow, man! I don't know, dude. I've done like hundreds, literally hundreds of like major permanent site specific installations that are made of steel and glass and foam and fabric. And um, it would be hard to pinpoint just one project that I love more than all of them. There's a few dogs in there along the years that you know it wasn't that crazy about when it was all done and whatever. But I think probably the most exciting project right now for us and for me as an artist, even as a business person, is this airport that we're doing in Salt Lake City. And one of the things I love about it is the almost blurring the lines between art and architecture. I love the scale of some of these things that we're doing that are going to be starting to get installed in the next couple of months. And it's been a 5-year project. One of those installations is called The Canyon. It's on the website. It's about a football field in length, two walls that are 3 stories tall, using about 5 acres of fabric and 7 miles of aluminum tubing. So I'm pretty stoked about that. And there's a bunch of other installations for that same project. So as a project that's currently happening, it's one of my favorites. We also just won, just before this pandemic broke out, I was in 10 days, I was on 9 different flights. I was in Atlanta, Boston, Albuquerque. Where the hell was I? Not Ohio, somewhere down there. And, pitching projects that I had been shortlisted for. And I won 3 of those. All of them have a lot of human depth to them. And if you just let me go for a minute, let me explain them really, really briefly. So the one in
Please.
Atlanta, in the late 70s, early 80s, about 30 African American children were murdered. You just check it out on the web, on the internet, and there's tons and tons of information there. And the current mayor of Atlanta was a child in that neighborhood at that time. And here we are, there was 30 kids. And so now here we are all these years later, 30 years later, 35 years later, whatever, a long time ago. They decided that it's time to do a memorial to these 30 murdered children on City Hall property. And I shortlisted for that project, and I just won it. It has an eternal flame, and it's just really, really beautiful, elegant, powerful. When I was pitching that project to the committee, one of the committee members was a mother of one of those children, and I was shaking hands with everybody as I was getting ready to leave, and came up to her to shake her hand, and instead we just hugged, and she wouldn't let go, and we cried a little bit. So that was super awesome to do art that has that kind of deeper meaning. So it's just not about being shiny and beautiful. And then the other one was in Albuquerque on the district attorney's office property, memorial to victims of gun violence, which is a super awesome project. And we won that one. And there were 5 mothers on that committee that were mothers of children that died in gun violence. So that was pretty intense. And we're also doing in Oklahoma a veterans building, a big veterans memorial thing. So these are the kind of projects that go deeper than just beauty and inspiration. So the airport in Salt Lake City is really all about nature and beauty and lowering the stress of travel and all of that. And totally all legit, and I'm very privileged to get to do it. These other three projects I just mentioned to you take it to another level of depth.
Yeah, the airport project, it looks amazing. I've been following along on Instagram, and that's a big, big project. And so let me ask you about the business side of that. Who bids that? Who gets the material? Like, how does that come to where you can go, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's what's gonna cost, and the business side of it. How does that work on, let's say, the airport deal? Is that something you do?
So what happens typically, and then the airport's not typical, but I'll say that typically every year we compete for maybe 150. We respond to 150 what's called RFPs and RFQs, requests for proposals, requests for qualifications. That budgets run from 100,000 to $1 million. You put in your 10 images, a letter of interest, a resume, whatever, and you send it off like hundreds of other artists do. And then you wait for the rejections to come back. And then in those rejections, I'd say about 150, maybe 15 or 20, we make the short list for, which means now I have the privilege of spending $5,000 to $15,000 putting a presentation together and flying somewhere and dancing on the table. And of those 15, 20 of those, we might win 3 or 4. So it's brutal, it's competitive, it's expensive, etc. Then from time to time, the phone rings by itself, which is my favorite marketing strategy, but I can't seem to make that happen enough. So one day somebody called and one of my staff said, Gordon, there's a Maureen Riley on the phone for you. I couldn't remember who that was. So I picked up the phone. I said, hey, Maureen. And hi, Gordon. I'm not thinking, who is this woman? I can't remember her. Well, we're getting ready to start on our project. And I'm like, cool. And I'm thinking, what project is she talking about? So I kind of stalled until I figured out what it was. And it was for this Salt Lake City airport project. And basically, they paid me really paid me handsomely to come up with design concepts for just the canyon that I was describing a moment ago. And then it kept growing and growing and growing. It's still growing. Well, we just got another part of that project is 1,000-foot long underground pedestrian tunnel. That project is probably 10 times the roughly annual revenue that we do.
Wow.
So it's a total game changer. And I feel like blessed every day. It's how I'm able to live in this beautiful house that I designed.
And how do you manage a big client like that and then other clients that you have as well? Because that Salt Lake, I mean, that's a big project and just keeps growing.
Well, there's first of all, there's two parts of these projects that are fun for me.
Okay.
One, one part is in the beginning when I've come up with something that they love and they want, they being a client. The next time that project's fun is when it's installed. Everything in between is a bunch of work. It's fucking work, 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 work. And I don't like that kind of work and I'm not that good at it. So what kind of work is it? It's project management, it's engineering, shop drawings, there's logistics all over the place. And so I very deliberately over these many years built an infrastructure around me that has these categories. So one's project, public art administration, project development, that's a person, 2 project managers, then there's accounting, then there's a couple of digital designers over here, there's a couple people on the floor of the shop, and then Darcy, who we call Frau Director, I call her Frau Director. So the short answer is that's all delegated,
Okay.
uh, my team, and so you have to be willing to carry a lot of overhead if you want to go big. You gotta have to, you have to pay for it, and then there's all that risk that's inherent in having all that infrastructure, all that overhead, and you damn well better keep that machine fed or you're going to get in trouble.
And so with that, what's your highest and best use of your time in your business?
Um, my highest and best use is, um, working with the clients.
Okay.
So, that's that charm thing. And, you know, I think it's just super important that you're good with people, and I am. And so that's what I do. And, people have to trust you to give you all that money to make something. And so I'm really good with client relations, I'll say. Also, you can call it project development, sales, whatever. And then obviously I'm an artist.
Art.
And
Mhm.
so that's kind of what I should be spending my time doing, but I spend an inordinate amount of time not doing those things. So, it's refereeing, all this stuff going on or swirling around you and stuff. And, but I think that would be my answer. The best use of my time is project development and designing.
That's awesome. And that's, you got to keep people coming in. So the project development and designing. Um, let's wrap it up here real quick. I wanted to ask you this question. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self with the knowledge and everything that you've taken in with life and business? Like, what advice would you give your younger self?
Uh, I wasn't expecting that kind of question. So usually I'm asked, what would I give a 20-year-old? What kind of advice would I give them now? Um, you know, Honestly, I've thought about it's actually not in the way that you've asked it, but I've often thought, would I had done something different on this
Mhm.
path that has been often painful and filled with anxieties and fear. And you don't know what the future holds. Look at the situation we're in now. How do you plan for the future when the future looks so well? We don't know what it looks like. It
We
doesn't
don't
look
know.
good right now, but it'll come back. um, and honestly, Matt, I really wouldn't do anything different.
That's awesome.
Maybe I wish I was in the time of the internet when I was 20, because it was a lot harder to find dates. So the whole girl thing, but didn't do that bad there either. But no, I wouldn't. I really, honestly, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. How would I want to do anything differently if I've landed where I've landed? Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? This is where I wanted to be, even bigger than I thought, and so I wouldn't change anything.
Do you get joy out of looking back at your struggles and then looking how you were able to overcome them? And like during it, it's stressful and anxiety, but then looking back now, going, man, remember when I did that or had this challenge and got through it? Do you get joy looking back on those sorts of things?
Wow, I get so much joy, pride, which is maybe an ugly word, to have come from so low.
Hmm.
My parents were both basically refugees, immigrants from Germany, and English was not the first language I had growing up as a kid. Um, and all the emotional abuse and all kinds of crazy shit swirling around me, and like I shared, no formal education and all of that. So to come from so low and so little talent, to be in a position to do the things I do today, brings me a lot of joy. And you have to be careful not to get that confused with pride. And I do have some pride about that. But one of the things that I dislike the most about humanity is prideful, cocky characters. And so I'm try very hard to keep my level of humility and gratitude at the top, and the pride, I try to keep that down towards the bottom.
Good for you. Good for you. And you're giving back too. You're on the city council?
No, I'm on the City of Napa Planning Commission,
Okay.
um, which is kind of one layer down. So council, there's 5 council members, and they are elected
Hmm.
by the community, and a planning commission position is an appointment from the city council. And I've been on that planning commission for 14, 15 years. And that's all about ensuring that as the community develops and moves forward, that the quality of buildings, the quality of the urban spaces that we create, um, are protected, and that we're doing the best that we can. So I've always been a big advocate for quality in the community.
Yeah, I went to a meeting when they were talking about the Saratoga development not too long ago, and I was really impressed with how like neutral you were, like both parties, like, hey, let's look at both parties, let's create a win-win. And how do we, I think one of the hot topics was the fence that was being put up. How do we make sure this looks good for our community in the long haul, not just for 5 years and then starts deteriorating? And so I was impressed with how unbiased you were to either side, and it was pretty cool because I had just helped a client purchase a house right there on Saratoga that backs up to that new development. So we were very curious to hear about that whole situation.
Well, you fell for my trick, and so I'm not biased. I mean, I'm not unbiased at all. I have
Hmm.
a strong bias,
Okay.
um, and I have a strong bias for quality architecture, which that development isn't. It's actually crap.
Hmm.
But by the time it gets as far as it had gotten, by the time it gets to the planning commission, it's way too late to change it. So all I'm trying to do is squeeze a little bit more quality out of the thing. But there's certainly a way to be balanced and make sure that you hear both sides, but I still have an agenda. I'm trying to bring it over here, but there's no point in offending anybody or being rude getting there.
I like that. I like that. And so if people want to follow you or get a hold of you, well, let me back up. Do you do personal art for people that, let's say they're a little affluent and they want your art? Do you do personal art at this time?
Yeah, we call it studio art or fine art, and
Okay.
over the years I've created hundreds of pieces. But I've never really, well, a few times, but I'm not really represented by galleries and all of that. And it's never the fine art I've made and will probably make in the future is not driven by sales. It's more driven just by exploration and this and that. But I do have a gallery at the studio where some of that art is on display, and it's always amazing to me that people will buy my art and hang it in their home, which is awesome. But I typically don't accept commissions for fine art because it's fine art is just kind of a thing you do in the studio. And if somebody says, I really like that one, but can it have a little bit more red on it and it can be this size, and I don't want to get involved in that stuff. So um, the fine art that I do is available for purchase by the public, which happens from time to time.
And is that studio open to the public or is it by appointment only?
Oh, it's open to the public, not right now during the pandemic, but yeah, we have there's a big red sign out in front that says open. It's a sign that the public is welcome to come in, and we have people walking in from time to time, but that's not really it's not a big economic driver or anything like that. But yeah, I've just totally loved that we have that beautiful studio, and I encourage your listeners to come and visit us. It's a kind of a cool place to visit.
Awesome. Give them the address.
1821 Monticello Road.
And you can't miss it with all the nice art that you have in front.
Sculptures out in front, it's kind of hard to miss.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So awesome. And then where can people follow along your journey as you continue building the airport hangar and everything else that you're doing?
Um, well, okay, here's a confession. So apparently I have an Instagram account, and apparently I have a Facebook account, and I don't know what other kinds social media accounts that I have. The reason I don't know is because I don't use it. But we do, as a studio, have followers on Facebook and that sort of thing. For me, I just direct people to my website because that's all she wrote right there. And if they sign up on the website, you get I think every 6 weeks or so, we push out an e-newsletter that shows all the different projects we're working on, things that just got installed, things that just won. Matt, I'd encourage you to go to my website and sign up to that. I'd
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is your website?
GordonHuether.com.
Pretty easy.
I
And
just put the www in front of that, but if you actually just type in my name,
it'll come
boom,
up. Yeah,
it's
it'll
right
come up.
there.
And I'll have a link down below so that way people can just click on that and go directly there and sign up for the newsletter. So, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up, Gordon? This has been a great interview.
No, I appreciate it, Matt, and I just encourage everybody to to do good and be righteous and make the world a better place than you found it, or get off.
That's an awesome closing. All right, guys, you've been listening to the Real Journey podcast. Hope you have a great day. Take care.